You're a spiritual being in physical form, a dichotomy of light and dark, where energy equals mass on a journey designed to fulfill our personal legend and purpose, to use humanity throughout, to amplify and transcend, tame the ego, raise the humanity. That's a signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the High Vibe Zone.
Hey y'all, hey. Happy fall and harvest and all those great things to everybody. It feels good to be in the high vibe zone. Again, I don't remember the last one I did, but I know James was on that one, which is great because he's going to be joining me on this one. But while we're waiting for my amazing guests to show up, I just thought I'd just hang out with y'all for a little bit. I want to just welcome you to the High Vibe Zone. If this is your first time, welcome. You are in the right place, whether you're watching live or recorded. If you have been in the High Vibe Zone before, welcome back. You know what this place is all about. Really elevating the conversation with high vibration. And conversation can be anything. It doesn't necessarily need to start with a topic that's joyful. It can be any topic, and we just transcend it here in the High Vibe Zone. So I just want to thank y'all for joining. I would love to know where you're coming from. Drop your name in the comments. Let me know what you're grateful for. Gratitude changes the attitude, and that is what we are here for. Felicia, hey girl, hey. Thank you. Yes, I feel like it has been a while. I've been hiding. This might be the last time until 2023 that y'all see me on the screen, but nevertheless, it is so nice to see your name and your amazing profile pic. So thank you. So while I'm waiting for my guest, which I will preface, and maybe James and I will talk about this, I completely spaced on the invite. So literally maybe like 15 minutes ago, I was like, oh, we're still on. So James is gathering himself and will be joining shortly. Or maybe not. We have no idea. I'm going to just hold the space and just enjoy my time with y'all. And I have a few things to talk about while we wait for our amazing guest. So let's see what has been going on. I mean, I haven't done the last High Vibe Zone. We talked about, oh gosh, what did we talk about? It was a really good conversation. James joined in. I would have to look back, but it was really good. I might have to link it in the comments. I can't even remember the conversation. However, I've been wanting to do a couple of High Vibe Zone or just like little nuggets in between. And one of the conversations that has been coming up a lot in my space, and I've shared this with y'all before. I'm a birth doula, so that means I help families birth their babies. But I'm also working on becoming a death doula, which means the basically the opposite, helping people transition out of life, whether it's the individual or the family, and holding that space, which is an interesting dichotomy, being a birth and death doula. But one of the things that I've been studying and I find fascinating, James has popped up. I'm going to bring him in a second. I'm going to finish this thought. One of the thoughts that one of the things I've been thinking about in relationship to birth and death is, here, at least in the US, we have a very interesting way of dealing with death. But there's a phrase that we use a lot is called rest in peace. And one of the things that have been coming up for me is like, I don't want my peace when I'm gone. I want my peace now. I want my peace here in this life. And so I've been on this really interesting journey to navigate peace in my life and protect that, and really prioritize that. And what does that mean for me, from my space to the people that I engage with, to the conversations that I engage with? I don't think we need to rest in peace. I think we need to have our peace now in this time, in this space, because once we transcend, we go back into our spiritual form and there is none of this like resting in peace component that happens. So I've been thinking about that a lot. So, but my guest is here, so without further ado, I'm gonna bring him in a second. But just that thought, I just wanted to drop that nugget for y'all. Like thinking about that phrase, we say it to people that that have already transitioned and passed out of this physical form. Rest in peace. What about our peace now? Like, what are we doing to get our peace now? Because once we're gone, that's not even a it's not even a thought for us. So, all right, I'm about to bring you in, James. Let's do this. Hello.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going? I prefaced earlier that I blanked on the invite and you literally had like 15 minutes to get together yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
So I thank you so much for joining me in the High Vibe Zone. Again, you were the last person on. It was audio, but now I get to see your amazing face.
Yeah, well, yeah, kind of. I'm grungy since I'm working on my office.
That's okay. And that's amazing that you're able to that you have this. Are you doing it yourself?
Yeah. It's that's actually my joy is in my hands. When I use my hands,
Nice.
so much joy. Yeah.
Nice. That's
I also sculpt with clay, and that's one of those things that when I'm in that process, it's a very meditative. Anything I do with my hands, when I get actually into the flow, it's very much a meditation for me. Yeah,
that's amazing. I admire folks. My husband's like that. I admire folks that can do those projects with their hands, and so I would love to see the before and after of what you have been working on with your hands. But thank you so much for
you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah.
I'm excited. Okay. So before we dive into our conversation, which is being the best version of you, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to everyone out there. So we're on LinkedIn, we're also on YouTube. Just kind of give folks an idea of who you are as a human being and just go ahead and flow with that. I just would love for you to introduce yourself there.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I think flow is a great conversation as well, right? Because that's I think it's at least for me, it's one of those things I think I've battled because I've believed in other people's expectations, not mine. So, which is that's a whole road we can go down. But who am I? I'm James Possible. It's a pseudonym. I adopted it. Geez, I don't know. It's been so long, Charisse, that people know me by James Possible. So the long and the short of it is it came upon me by accident. But it was very much an epiphany. When it hit me, it was like, wait a second, this is me. This is my voice. And I, just because of how I grew up, I don't have a relationship with my family. I literally divorced them. I had to. And it's not one of those things, family is one of those things that's interesting because when you tell most people that kind of a thing, they're like, oh, no, you should forgive and make up. And you know what? That's not always true. And I think it's important that we give those people permission to remove themselves from those situations, because not every family situation is going to be resolved with forgiveness and some therapy and stuff like that. It just won't. Yeah. And which kind of takes me to the, I'm so, at the core of everything I do is I advocate for the individual, for the self. because there's so many things in this world that are they're so willing to tell us how we should view ourselves, and how we should think about ourselves, and what we should be, and how we should do it. And hang on, get this little message out of my way here. So the and the other side of that coin is money, understanding money, having a relationship with money, and really all these things. And even when the deeper I dig with myself and others, the more I just recognize that it doesn't matter if it's business, your home life, if you're an athlete, whatever it is you're choosing to do, it's always going to come back to you. You are the biggest challenge. And so I'm all about holding a space. Not everybody grasps that terms, but to making room for somebody to simply be where they are and how they are. And even if it's uncomfortable, I see this is one of the things I think we do people a great disservice when we don't allow them to lean into their discomfort. And so I am somebody that will sit in that discomfort, and I will work through it with that person. Go wherever we need to go, because even when we talk about money, we talk about family, we talk about job, whatever. There's conflict generally has discomfort, and this notion of being positive just for the sake of being positive is a very destructive thing, because it takes away from the person's truth. So there's a positive perspective, but then there's this, I think I want to call it almost a toxic positive language that really does take away from your truth. And as we grow, I'm kind of chopping up and going a couple different ways here.
All good.
Huh? All good. Okay. Yeah.
All good. Yeah.
This is really where I am in my heart. And, given my background, my childhood and stuff like that, it's kind of interesting that, it's not really a surprise anymore. I think it was in the beginning that trauma tends to be a discussion that shows up in many of the conversations when I'm with somebody. And there can be trauma with anything, it can show up in so many different ways. So I'll just stop right there, and then we can go wherever we need to go after that. But I'm a lover of humanity, like you. I love self, because you're not second best. Your voice matters. I'm getting kind of emotional about that, but there was a scene, Robin Williams, I think it was Good Will Hunting, where they were in the office, him and I can't think of the actor's name, but his father just beat him brutally, put out cigarettes on him and stuff like that. And Robin Williams was the psychologist or therapist working with him. And this one scene, he said, "It's not your fault." And, he pushed back, right? When you're in that anger and you're in that place and you're working through those things, and we can do that with anything, right? There's always that one to push back when somebody gives you permission and gives you space to not own it, to not hold that pain, right? And it took them 3 or 4 times, and then they eventually ended up hugging and, crying but it finally soaked in. And I think sometimes, one of the things we miss in this busyness in this world today is that until your heart is broken open, it's really hard to understand where you belong. Logic's not going to get you there. It's going to take your heart as well.
I appreciate you sharing all of that. And it, I believe, sums up a lot of a good part and portion of you, and like it showcases you from everything that you said. And I mean, it's so aligned with the conversation that we're having today.
Yes.
And I think it's wonderful that space can be created for conversations. And I often, when I speak at companies or when I do workshops, I mention I was like, awkward silence really is only a moment of misalignment in communication. It's nothing really awkward. It just means that as the frequency of communication is happening, there is a pause. Yep. There is a pause. And in most Western culture and tradition here in the US, people don't like that gap, that space. Yep. But there's, I don't forget who said it, but it's the space between the bars that keep the tiger in, and it's the space between the notes that make the music. And so, as you talk about holding space and that uncomfortability, or just, really allowing people to kind of settle into that, I completely resonate with that as a birth doula, as a birther.
Yes, absolutely. Right.
It's a big, it's a big thing. And so I love that you brought that up. And so let's shift a little bit into, okay, how this topic came to be, because I'll lay the little bit of a pave, and then you take it away in terms of, you and I were on a high vibe zone. And then I told you, I was like, whatever you want to talk about. And then you had shared a post that inspired you. And you were like, I want to talk about this. So we're like, all right, let's talk about it. And so can you talk a little bit or describe the post a little bit, and then
Sure.
how this title came to be, and where would you like to start to anchor this conversation?
Sure. And as I shared with you, I thought the title that would be great is being the best version of you. And then I said, ironically spoken, right? So this is not the common meme discussion that I want to have. So where it came from was, there was a child, I'm not sure how old, a year, maybe two, in a video, I don't know, it was a TikTok or whatever, but trying to blow out the candle and couldn't push enough air with his mouth. And brilliantly, what did he do? He cupped his hand and waved, and the candle went out.
Mm-hmm.
And there was kind of a pause in that moment. He's looking around and, trying, not sure, not feeling good about what he's doing. And, and then I can't recall exactly what happens after that, but then finally they start clapping and cheering him on and stuff like that. And the comments that came in that post, took me to this place that I felt like this was an important discussion to have. Because there's so this child's looking for validation, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. And what I don't know how many of us know and understand that for a boy, by the time he's 5, his emotions have been turned off. He's been taught that by society, right? The girl the young girl between the ages of 10 to 12, she loses that voice about herself, right? That this is my choice. This is what I want. So at 10, she may, like if you asked her to order a pizza, what do you want on it? And she would happily tell you everything. But by the time she gets around 12, suddenly she's asking you, what do you want on the pizza? And her choices aren't there. So we have these things that shape us, and that's just a normal interaction. But we have other things that shape us as well, right? So the child learns. How does the child learn? The child learns through observation, right? We think the parent that thinks their words are the key to everything. They're no. What you do says everything to that child.
Yeah,
everything, and so it's so important to understand that. And so again, the advocating for self, right? So you understand that it just really struck a nerve for me. I had a corporate session. There was a group, and we were doing an exercise, and there's a space. They were all started in one line, and they started stepping out here and stepping out there. And as we worked through it, there was one woman left in the middle by herself. And she literally was frozen. And she could not choose for herself. And as we tend to have, we have instigators among us, and especially in the corporate world, an instigator finally pushed, and she eventually yielded to that. And so in that moment, when she was struggling hardest with herself, which is that point of discomfort, right? She was not allowed to simply sit in that. We weren't allowed to interact and maybe look at what's going on, right? And it's unfortunate. Because how many times does that happen in your life, that somebody doesn't really give you the space to be you? They have whatever they have going on, and the convenience is that you follow along so they can continue on whatever course they're on. And so, yeah, I just, whenever we're silenced, for whatever reason we're silenced, I struggle with that. I struggle with that greatly.
You know, you bring up a really good point around the child. And I will say, I know you're a parent. I'm a mother of 5. I joke, kids are like pancakes. You burn the first couple, like you kind of don't really, kind of like, I'm like, oh God, so I'm actually now I'm in a better flow. But you're absolutely right in terms of teaching them to self-advocate for themselves. And, you work with adults, I work with adults as well. And something that I have noticed is the workplace is often the only time they get a chance to learn, to try and expand that lesson. But by then they've already been conditioned to not speak up for themselves. I'm in an interesting space right now in my life where, so I'm preparing for the birth of our 6th baby. And I will say this is the first time I've actually reached out to this community that I've been cultivating for almost 6 years, that I've reached out and asked for help. And what that looks like is, hey, can you help me with this? hey, can you pick up a kid? Are you available to do this, that, and the other?
Wow.
And something that I'm noticing is we were never really taught. We had to do it all ourselves. We were taught to do it ourselves. And, you know, the component of being the best version of you is not independent of the best versions of others. And most people are at their best when they are of true service and giving from that space of joy. So like you mentioned, you love working with your hands. And
Right.
I can just imagine you being lit up if someone's like, hey, I have this project. I'm not really sure how to do it. Do you know how to? And you would just rock it because it's kind of goes into this. Have you heard of Dharma? Have you heard of that concept of Dharma before? Like,
Yeah, I don't actually know what it is though.
so Dharma, I'll explain it the best way I can because I kind of just have learned this expansion of the word. So if you take the beginning cells of a bumblebee, the beginning cells of an elephant, and the beginning cells of a human, you can't tell the difference. You don't know which one is which until they start to go into their, bumblebee.
Yeah, until it started to develop. Yeah.
So, but the bumblebee as it grows has its own path. It's to bumble and bee. It's to do its thing, right? And the elephant has its path. And then us uniquely have our own dharma, which is like our almost like a calling, like something that just we're innately built and designed to do before society comes in. So what it looks like is without interruption from society, your dharma could be maybe you're a master builder, right? And that was your dharma the entire time, but between like the very young ages that you were talking about, someone's like, no, you actually need to do this, you actually need to do that. It's like taking someone out of their what they were meant here to do because ego has interjected. And so it takes you on this path of steering away from the best version of you to conforming to what someone thinks is the best version of you, while they still don't know what the best version of them is, because if they did, they wouldn't be telling you what you should be doing, right? So there's this whole concept. So what happens in life is eventually, or sometimes never, people start to get this, like they've been wearing this itchy sweater that doesn't really fit. And they're like, what is going on? And it's because they've separated themselves from their dharma, their calling. And then they find that because of society, we have to figure out how to make money first and then do what we love. Whereas the dharma kind of says, do the areas that light you up and everything else will flow to you. And that's counterproductive to our society, but it's this very deep concept that really gives some understanding of what it is we can do with our lives. And people talking about purpose, and again, that best version of you, like I love how you brought that out, because it is independent of the ego, independent of what people think of you, and it's independent of what people have said to you about you. And then once you kind of excavate those things, you start to see, oh, wait, I actually love doing this. And once you go into that, everything else just opens up. But when there's resistance, those things persist in a way that keep us silent, and indecisive, and almost powerless in so many ways. Because we have, like you said, the pizza. I love that analogy of just like, what do you want on the, we found a way to cater. So then we found a way to cater to others. And then how this relates to kind of what I was sharing earlier, we forget to ask for help because we don't know how to advocate for ourselves. We don't know how to say, hey, I am going to need to rest after I have this baby. Can you make a meal for me? Like, are you available to do that? And most of the time, I mean, everyone I've asked has said yes. No one said no. And guess what I was able to do? I was able to build a village within my community. So when I go birth my baby, I don't have to worry about I have someone to pick up the kids. I have someone to do this. I have someone to do that. And it's all from that point of asking, but I would never be able to, I feel like I would never be able to do that if I didn't explore that best version of myself and how I show up, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. Yeah, it's so again, for me, it's a statement of, I'm saying it ironically, right? Because, so you said words, I'm a word person, so
Yes.
words stick with me. So village, that just touched my heart, because this is what corporations don't teach us. They take us away from village. And I don't want to hate on corporations, but it's just the truth of that's the processes that they create are not about village. They're about this. You're a cog, and this is what you do.
Yeah.
And so, and that's just a fact. So the village, we can, in a village, we can do so much more, right?
So much more.
So much. And maybe I don't want to say it like that. Maybe I'm thinking, I don't want to say that we can do so much more, right? Let me say it like this. When we're talking about a village, so much more can happen without me having to be involved in every point of that happening.
Yes.
And I don't even have to be a supporting role in all of it, right? So, but because it's a village, there will be times that I do take a certain place and I do bring a certain value, but I don't always have to be this thing that's up here,
right?
Being measured and compared,
right?
And corporately being reviewed every 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's just something about that that's just so broken when we talk about the human. Humans are not robots. And we just, at some point, I would just, if we could just get past that one thought. But you also talked about ego and separation. And so this is, and Sharice, this is my heart. This is my meditation and my thoughts that have brought me to this.
Yeah.
And when I talk about meditation, I'm not saying I don't go into a yoga pose and, it's literally when my hands are engaged, when I'm engaged in creation, that my thoughts fly, and they tend to show me insights, right? Epiphanies. But so I'm not a fan of the word ego, because I think ego takes you away from yourself. I think for me, I choose to say pride, because that keeps me with myself. And pride can absolutely do what ego does. We're never separated from ourselves. And when I think there's a lot of language culturally, absolutely in self-growth and those kind of things, that talks about separation, about how we're disconnected, and we are never disconnected from ourself. And we've got to understand that self is always with us. We may be distracted and we may not have. I'll share a story. Can I do that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So I was working with this woman, and it was, and she's trying to figure out. She was heavy into MLM, right? So she was a go-getter, and so we were trying to figure out why it wasn't working for her, and she couldn't get past a certain point. And as we talked and worked through things, some things bubbled up. Again, I talked about trauma, right? So trauma popped up, but we would set these little. But she was really good with antiques. Really good with antiques. So we said, okay, maybe that's a way for you to find another stream of revenue, right? Maybe that's a way for you to change course. So we explored it. She started setting these targets, and one after another, nothing. Then in one session, she talked about, and I think it was just like a little quip, Cherise, about her childhood dream, with an easel open on the Rhine, sitting in front of a bistro, painting the people. And it was just that fast. And I'm trying to recall, it's been so long, whether or not she was going to keep talking, but it seems like I had to bring it back to that, right? And we really looked at that. She hated her life. She hated her boss. Everything in her life was a struggle. She lived in, there's something that I've noticed with a lot of abused people is that they tend to mute their life in color. They don't have a lot of bright colors around them. And she lived that way too. And that's my anecdotal, that's my experiences, right? So, but when we touched on that 12-year-old dream, everything changed for her. And I mean, like 24 hours changed. Her boss, who she hated, suddenly commissioned her for 3 pieces of work in the office. She started selling her artwork. She started it it was like night and day. Like there was no, something we talk about, it's a process. Well, yeah, all that other stuff was a process, but once this truth was found for her, there was no process after that. It was her. She just somewhere along the way had to let go, had buried that voice, that truth. And I think many of us have those things in us that, and you kind of touched on that, right? That we don't, it's buried by so many other things. The voices of others, the expectations of surviving, if you're a mother, you have children, even if you're a father, right? It's like, what are the things that you're building up on yourself that you have to be? And all of that's within. Yeah. I think I shared with you that before. I think we talked about this. That the thing about the best version of you, to me, the best version of you is right now. The best version of me is right now. If I learn, if I grow my skill set, I learn more, and 24 hours from now, I can do something amazingly well compared to what I could do today. Does that make it a better me? No, it just means in that context, in that moment, because that's all we have, right? Is now. In that now, I am the best version of me. I just happen to be more skilled at something else. And we are always enough in every moment. And when we don't, literally, when we don't see that, and I'm not saying that I don't ever have struggles with this, right? But when we don't grasp that right now, when you are enough, we lose our truth, right? We have an inability to function. We become dysfunctional, and the thing is, it's not the next best. It's not the next right step, but it's the next step. What next step comes to mind for you?
Yeah.
Trust yourself.
Yeah, that's
I don't
something.
know. Did that make sense?
It makes sense, and that's a tall order for some folks that don't know what trust actually feels like. That, you know, for themselves, for others, in an experience, you're right about this status of just kind of like freezing in place. And there's this thing that comes to mind is you have all the ingredients, bake the cake. You have all the ingredients. And it really, this change and the shift that you're are talking about in terms of that, it's not even the next best, it's just taking that step.
Yes.
Happens in centimeters and millimeters. I would say that it's often perceived that things happen in miles and yards, and you know that it's actually, so my husband's a welder, and he's very good at the math thing. I am not good at the math thing. I'm assuming you're good at the math thing. You're building stuff.
Yeah.
And if you are a centimeter or a millimeter off, it doesn't matter the scale of the project. It's going to be messed up. And to assume that we need to get there, right? To get there right now would mean inches, yards, miles, whatever. But it's literally millimeters and centimeters that really make up that distance to get to where you're trying to go. And I love that you talked about your version of you, the best version of you is right now, because that is the present and now. Yes. And now. And you're always going to experience it if you are present, not if you're in the past, not if you're in the future. It is right now. And I love that you brought that up, and that story is great. And it's an amazing feeling when you can somehow wiggle out of that place that you know is not serving you. That's like, I can see it. I always often say, when people talk about things that they want to do in life and they articulate it so well, they're like so passionate, they're not doing it now. I was like, well, you can't miss a cat you never had. It's out there. It's there. You're just, there's some space that just, there's something that you just got to clean up a little bit. And so as you think about, you know, as we are talking about this and thinking about where people can go for their best version of themselves, one thing that came up when you were talking, and I'm so glad I remember this, because I was like, I'm at that stage, James. I'm like, memory is not the,
I get it.
The top of the list. But we've been facing the wrong way our entire lives. We've been facing outwards. We've been facing looking this way. We've been facing out, looking at everything else, everyone else. And while that observation is key, the way that we grow the best is when we face inward. And when you were talking about that, I'm like, that's so profound. So my little nugget from being the best version of you is realizing you've been facing the wrong way your entire life. You've been looking out when we should be looking in. And often when we're trying to make a transformation, I always think about this in like, let's say we're in a room of a house. There's layers to that, but we're in a room of a house and we're trying to push the door open. And we're pushing, right? We're
Right.
doing all the things, all the lists. We got all the audio books. We got all the code, everything, right? Only to find that the door opens inward.
Oh.
And then, like it's such a profound
That's
thought. And
beautifully said. Yes.
Once you start to realize that, like, oh, wait. It's like whenever you go to like different offices and it's like pull versus push, you're kind of like, but imagine yourself in a room and, you've been trying. And hopefully someone hears this. Maybe this message is for someone that's listening. You've been trying, but you're supposed to pull inwards.
Okay. I want to tap in on that.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. So, wow. Yes. So you don't understand the door pulls in.
Mm-hmm.
So you're pushing on it.
Mm-hmm.
Not only are you pushing on it, but you're adding to your knowledge and understanding. You're working to make you a better you.
Yeah.
Just so you can push that door open.
Yeah.
And all you had to do was pull on the door and it would have opened. And that's really the irony of that phrase for me is that you, as you are enough. And Thomas Leonard said this, and I don't know if I'll say it exactly the way he said it, but he's passed, so he's the father of coaching. That's the title they've given him. But he said that all of us are doing our very best in every moment, even when it's clear to us on the outside that we're not. And that speaks to two things, well, probably more if we go deep in it, right? But it speaks to context of living, because we are contextual, right? And then it also speaks to the imperfection of being human. There is no perfection. And it's just when we do that to ourselves, we rob ourselves of time, first off, because we're spending our time on something that isn't going to get us anywhere different. And so our truth is the most powerful thing. And that's where we come back to the word I love is faith. And I'm not talking about religious faith. I'm just talking about faith. Because when somebody's operating in faith, there are no questions. And when we're in our most, like, I guess you could equate it to flow as well. But when we're in that state, there are no questions. We just do. We just be. And the moment you think consciously outside of that do and be, you suddenly break the flow. And that's that faithful state. Believing doesn't get you there. Believing is like not having. And this faithful state, and we've all had it. So this flow, this faithful state, we've all had it. And in those moments, we're just simply doing and being. And I think one of the best, the most empowering things we can do is is to find those moments in our life when we were like that, where we operated unquestionably. We just did. We just were who we are. And that experience, once we begin, like we're experiential beings. That's why we have all these senses in us, right? We experience. Logic is not an experience, right? That's a brain exercise, right? It's burning calories mentally. But when we begin to tie ourselves back to the experiences in our life that show us a lens of our truth, those are the experiences that are life-changing. When we learn to hold those, we can then be in the present in that same way. And if you do have to grow a skill set, then grow a skill set. But don't grow a skill set to become a better version of you, because you're already that. You're growing a skill set to accomplish something else, not to be a better you. You're a doula. No, you're Charisse. What you do is a doula thing. You get what I'm saying? The person is never the thing. Like, I program, I work on computers, I sculpt. I am not those things. I'm James. Whatever this being is, that's me. And you see these, and it's kind of hard to, some people might be getting lost on that. But when you start looking at professional athletes, when they retire, what happens? Because their identity is tied to their performance. They lose, well, they don't lose. Their performance became their identity. So once that's gone, they're not clear a lot of times who they are.
Yeah. I mean, you just spoke something so profound. We are human beings, not human doings. And what the problem with doing is that when we don't do what our title says, when we don't do the label that we are given, when we aren't doing that, we don't know who we are and we feel like we're lost. And then it's, the thing is, and I'm not sure if you saw the intro, but we are spiritual beings in physical form. You're absolutely right that we are having this. We are humans having. We are not spirit. We are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yes.
And when there's this other, when you are, neuroscience, you will hook up a brain and they can tell you where all of, the thing that is telling you to move your fingers and all of that, but they cannot find the commander within that. They will never find that. And that's because you are not this, which is fascinating to think about and might lose some people but I will tell you, I've sat with people that have built exceptional careers. I mean, boom, boom, boom on paper, and lost and lost and lost and lost, because once they lost that job, or once they lost the love for it, or once they realized it didn't fulfill them, they're like, who am I?
Yes.
Because you are not what you do. I hope people hear this and really breathe this in. You are not what you do. There is so much more to that. And I love that you brought it up. I also want to touch on something. I wrote a note down so I wouldn't forget, which is you talked about the word perfect. When people say that, it is such like you said, it's really a negating of our humanity, because to be human is absence of perfect or perfection. The only thing that we know that is perfect is nature. Things that were created long before we were even arrived. That operates in perfect flow, like how a hummingbird, how a bumblebee bumbles. Like, that is perfection. That's our relationship to what we know is perfect. But to say, oh, I'm not perfect, is to automatically discredit the fact that you're human. Because there's no human that will ever even know what that feels like. And to give that standard within our society, like you said, measured and reviewed and all of that, it really is it's almost trying to automate humanity, which is not something. It's the
Well, it's not going to happen.
No. So I love that, what you said. And I want to kind of wrap up with your final words of wisdom for folks that are listening. And then also, how can people get in touch with you? Kind of just give us the whole shebang. Like, what do you want to leave us with, the people listening, people watching the recording? And then how can people reach out to you, and what would they reach out to you for? Like, I think, you mentioned a few things, but I'd love for you to just establish that here in this space.
Sure. He gave me too many things.
I did, yes. Let's start with your wrap-up words of wisdom. I call this the mic drop. Let me get my little emoji. The mic drop.
The mic drop.
Let's do it. Here we go.
I think we did the mic drop. Okay, so the mic drop is this. And absolutely, this is something that you would want to connect with me on. Our habits. So we're imperfect. We're contextual. And what do I mean by contextual? Contextual is that if you're at a fancy dinner and something happens, you will respond a certain way, given where you're at. If you're in the same thing happens and you're at home in a completely different environment, your response and your interactions, your experience of that is probably going to be completely different. So contextual means that depending on the moment in time, the place in time where we are going to be, we're going to interact. We're going to raise ourselves. We're going to meet the moment as we understand the moment. And it's so important that we understand that, because and that imperfection, you may meet that moment and it doesn't work the way you want it to work. Well, that's okay, because we're imperfect. And so whatever it is that's keeping you in a place you're consistently, if this is a consistent thing that you keep bumping up against, right? Habits are what drives us. And this is why I talked about childhood and the things we learn in childhood, and we own those things. And yeah, there's been ad nauseum so many discussions around this, right? But the reality is that the habits that are born out of it from our childhood, from our youth, those habits served a very real purpose. But as you're older, they may have no value. In fact, they may actually prevent you from doing things. We have habits around money. We have habits around relationships. And so money is a relationship. Got to be really clear about this. Money is a relationship. Your experiences with others, that's a relationship. Your work, your job, everything, you're in relationship with that. When we don't understand our relationship with, and you plug that in, job, money, whatever it is, that's when we struggle. That's when we struggle, because we don't understand our place, because we're not in relationship with. And so I businesses, because this is where one of the biggest pains I had is in my business. I recognized how little I understood about the finance part of it, the assets, the money.
Uh-oh. Looks like I lost James. Let me text him and see if everything's okay. While we're in the middle of the wrap up. All right, give it a few minutes and see if you'll. There you go. Okay, you're back.
Okay, so just briefly. So
Okay.
if you want to change, your relationship with money, and you want to understand wealth and what it means and how to accumulate and build wealth, and you want to live a better quality of life, well, that's a lot of the conversations I have. They're just about that, stop grinding and start living. And we get so caught up in the grind that we forget that, that living is why we're here. And when we do find our joy, and when we do find our place, like you said, everything flows. If you've ever been in that state of flow, that's the magic. So if you're not smiling, if you're not finding that joy, I definitely understand how to get that, how to help you find that joy and how to hold that joy. So,
and how can people reach out to you? Where can they find you?
Probably the easiest way would be just to simply email me, and I could do that at social@wealthyegg.com.
See if I can put that in there. social@egg.com. Is this right?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with me in the High Vibe Zone.
Thank you.
Conversation of just greatness and lots of little nuggets. Don't go anywhere. I'm gonna just chat with you backstage, but I'm gonna do our super sick intro, outro, and close up the High Vibe Zone. Thank you all for being here. I don't know if this is my last High Vibe Zone of 2022. It might just be. I have no idea.
I'm so excited for you, Cherise.
We'll see. If y'all don't see me in a while, just send me some light and love and send me a note. Be like, y'all, everything's gonna work out well. So
it's baby time.
Yeah, I'm gonna go into hibernation for sure. But I want to just thank everybody for watching and just being a part of this experience. And thank you so much for being here with me and my amazing guest, James Possible, in the High Vibe Zone. Until next time, everybody. Light and love. Have a beautiful, beautiful rest of your week. Don't forget to harvest that amazing, amazing abundance that is coming to you. Thank you, James.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. Here we go.
You're a spiritual being in physical form, a dichotomy of light and dark, where energy equals mass on a journey designed to fulfill our personal legend and purpose. To use humanity throughout, to amplify and transcend. Tame the ego, raise the humanity. That's a signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the High Vibe Zone.